Hi, this is a video about the Eight of Swords. Uh, I'd like you to show. I'd like to show you what the card looks like before I start the video. Okay, here it is. Okay, so what you notice about the Eight of Swords, there's a castle in the distance, and the woman is quite removed from it in a wet area with perhaps mud, and the Eight Swords are surrounding her. So I think one of the things we ought to know about the Eight of Swords that is important, uh, don't isolate yourself in times when you're going through a sticky situation or a difficult situation, and know that you probably ought to seek out uh, things and people that can help. So that's one of the messages. When you take a look further at the card, you find that the woman is surrounded by eight swords. She's tied at the waist, her hands and shoulders, and she's blindfolded. But what's interesting about the card is, and it's something interesting to notice, the swords, most of them, I think like 90% of them, are not so well fixed in the ground, and it's muddy. So I think the eight swords are something of a psychological uh, condition in some cases, and we maybe ought to know that the situation we find ourselves in may not be so intimidating as we think, or that other people or other things is trying to manipulate us into thinking that we're hopeless. Because what's interesting to know that uh, most of the swords, the handle of the sword seems to be shoulder height, and I think the woman could easily push them over, and if she's just very careful about it and doesn't make any sudden movements. So first of all, you can use your being blinded or being hopeless or being misinformed or being kept in the dark as an advantage, and maybe you can use that as a tactic or a strategy. So maybe, say for instance, you have to do with people that try to keep you in the dark about things. Maybe you act like you are foolish and act as blind as they make you, so you turn it to your own advantage, and you could perhaps frustrate the situation or the people involved, and they'll leave you alone, because remember, the swords surrounding the woman probably are not as well fixed in the ground as they think they are, or as you think they are. So maybe with a few slips, and I say that slips from your side, uh, you can uh, agitate those that are trying to control you or trying to make you feel helpless, and make them back off. This is an interesting thought, I think. And what's also interesting is the woman reminds me of the Temperance card, because there's one puddle or stream, and she stands with that foot in the stream and somewhat with the other foot on land. And in the Temperance card, the angel's eyes are also closed and is focusing. So maybe like the Temperance card, you follow the advice of the Temperance card, and when you're in a difficult situation, you make little changes, because in Temperance we have to do with the alchemist, and for his experiments to succeed, he probably has to put it through many trials and make little changes until it succeeds. So maybe when you're in a difficult situation, you change something small and see what effect it has on the situation, instead of trying to make sudden movements, because if you're in the Eight of Swords, you probably will cut yourself if you make drastic changes or movements. So those are a few ideas for the Eight of Swords, and I think what we can take away from the card is firstly, again, not to isolate ourselves and involve other people that can assist us in the situation, because the woman is far removed from the castle, from people she knows and trusts, and you don't want that. So maybe you find somebody you can trust and tell them about your situation. Maybe they can see it from an angle you don't. And I think when the woman's blindfolded, she probably doesn't know the swords that are surrounding her are not so sturdy. And I think one of the other messages about the Eight of Swords is get to know the weaknesses of, or some of the weak points in the situation that is threatening you. Because the woman that's tied up doesn't know probably that the swords are not so deeply fixed in the ground, and that she could probably just push them over. Because think of it as people surrounding her. If you're blindfolded and you bump into somebody, you probably can just get away with an excuse and say, well, sorry, I didn't know, I didn't see. So if people put you in a position where you cannot see, or they want to keep you in the dark, you probably can't be responsible for the mishaps you cause because of that thing they do to you. So you use that to your advantage. Okay, so those are a few ideas for the Eight of Swords. Of course, you can do much more with the card. You can leave your comments and questions below, and my email is in the credits. Okay, cheers.